Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Justin Gaynor from Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine. Glad to be with you here tonight. I know it's been a while since we did a Saturday night show, and I'm glad to have you guys here. If you were with us live, excellent. I have posted on my Facebook page a link. If you want to participate in the conversation, please visit me just go to Facebook, type in Justin Gaynor. There's a link there on the promotion for this show. Where you can actually click in and participate. I'll try and take some visitors if possible as we kind of move through tonight's show. And I also wanted just to thank all of you who have been reading Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine consistently. We will have been producing the magazine for about a year now. And so we are moving forward. I'm really enjoying producing the magazine. It has been a benefit to General Media Consulting Company, which is the primary business that I'm engaged in, that is helping entrepreneurs and visionaries to build strong and fruitful businesses. So if you want to check out this month's edition of Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine, of course you can do that for free at gentlemanspurpose.com. And so getting into tonight's show, I really want to kind of lay the groundwork, I guess, because it has been a while since we've connected. I am currently in North Carolina, Statesville, North Carolina. It's a small town in North Carolina where my mom was born. And basically what's happening is on Easter Sunday, I went ahead and I left South Florida, went and spent some time with my family in New Smyrna Beach. Got to celebrate the fifth birthday of my nephew, Lucas. So I was very excited to be able to participate and be present for that. And from there, I moved on to what's called Warner Robins, Georgia. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that tonight, where my stepdad currently resides. And I got to spend some time with him. Now, I haven't spent probably more than 24 hours with this guy in over 20 years, but he was a major impact on my young life as a teenager, as I was kind of growing up and in those formative years. So I was really excited to be able to spend some time, and it was just a really great visit. And from there, I went on to visit a city, which you will be finding out more about as I produce the June edition of Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine, and that is Charleston, South Carolina. By far one of the most beautiful cities that I've ever had the pleasure of visiting. And I just saw a lot of really cool things there. And I'm excited to be able to share that visit with you in next month's edition. And then from there, I moved on to Statesville, North Carolina, where I am now. I'm staying here with Johnny Cross, and as many of you know, he was my ministry partner for about 3 years as I brought the gospel of Jesus Christ to the folks here at the Brookdale Peachtree retirement community, the elders here in Statesville, North Carolina. So as we get into tonight's show, I wanted to, of course, give a shout out to everybody at the Anchor Inn down in Lantana, Florida, or Lake Worth, Florida. One of the best seafood places that you're going to find in the area. Just amazing prices, and the quality of the food is excellent. It's right there on the freshwater canals and the lake leading out to Lake Osborne and Lake Eden. And again, it's just a great place to go in. Got something going on pretty much every day of the week. And so you can give them a call at 561-868-5900 or visit them at lakesideanchorin.com and check out their menu and everything. Of course, they're on Facebook as well, and Instagram, and even LinkedIn. So check them out. And if you're in the area, I highly encourage you to go hang out in the tiki, listen to some music, and enjoy some nice tropical beverages and some great seafood. So tonight we're going to be looking at, we're going to start, of course, as we always do, with the idea of faith. And basically, when we think about the concept of faith, faith is described as the substance of things, hoped for. So it's not something that's can necessarily grab right there in the present, but somehow when we believe that we have something, we draw that out of the future and into the present. And it's an amazing thing. It's a spiritual dynamic that really is mind blowing. We've seen many, many times in the scriptures when it comes to divine healing, where Jesus would say something like, "Your faith has healed you." So this person felt that God, the Creator God, was able to bring forth a wholeness and a healing that exists in the future that He's promised, and somehow bring that into the present. And when His word intersected with the present reality, and so it seems kind of like big picture stuff, but it really is a very simple concept. It is trusting in the character and the nature of God. And so in this month's edition of Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine, we kind of explore this idea of believing into the now, of actually calling the future reality that has been promised to us into the present. And the more and more we do that, it's like the more quickly we actually arrive at that future. And so it's a very, very interesting dynamic when we think about faith. Now we've of course have all sorts of cults and things that have like this. We've heard of the word of faith movement, and if you're going to believe that you're going to be a millionaire by next week, then it's going to happen. And the thing is that when we pray asking the Father's will to be done, then our prayers will be answered. And the cool thing about it is that when God's Spirit is at work in you, the desires of your heart are brought into alignment with the best possible path for your life. Why? Because you're in communion and relationship with God. So He's going to lead you to those things where they just appear in your mind and you ask for them and boom, there they are. So that builds your faith, and it also creates an understanding of the power of that relationship, because all good gifts come down from the Father of lights. And so as we explore that idea, it's somewhat like going back to the future. In the scriptures, it talks about standing by the path and asking for the ancient ways, and within those ancient ways, finding the good way and actually walking in it. And so there's this past that exists, that we see in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, where there is this beautiful creation that is just charged with the grandeur of God, and yet in the midst of that, there is this situation where all of creation falls into this spiral of destruction, and yet there is this promise and this reality of the steadfast love and faithfulness of God, that offers a future, even though our present circumstances would tell us the exact opposite of that. I recently was listening to a pastor, and I'm the last person to be blasting or critiquing pastors, but I think that we have a lot of unbelief going on within Christian preaching these days. We look at the world and we see that things are not good. We look at the world and we see that things are not the way that they should be. And then because of that, we begin to doubt the core reality of the gospel, that Jesus Christ is Lord. Not that He will be Lord, but that He is presently the one in charge of things, the one ruling and reigning, and that because He is seated at the right hand of the Father, having received all authority in heaven and earth, that is how we need to shape our lives. That is our worldview. That every authority structure that exists is directly accountable to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And when we believe that, somehow faith brings that reality more and more into our present circumstances. And when God is King, then things start to get set right. Things that are out of sorts become essentially are put back into a proper alignment, and things that are broken, things that are sick, things that are dying begin to experience new life. And that is a powerful, powerful thing. And so definitely want to encourage you guys to read the article "Believing into the Now," which is in this month's edition of Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine. And also, while we're on that, I want to also encourage you guys Financial giving is one of those things that is it's always a sticky subject, because a lot of people will use the reality that churches and nonprofits and institutions that are doing good in the world require resources to do what they are actually called to do. And if you want to engage in and be a part of that entity or organization, a lot of times it means volunteering time. It means giving resources like money, and those sorts of things. And so if you are allowing uh, the fact that churches need money to operate, and that if you're part of a church and part of that family of God, that actually contributing to the household is something financially is something that you're called to do, then I just want to encourage you to get over it, because the reality is that if you want to look after the widow and the orphan, and you want to care for people, and you want to see the broken things restored, there are resources required for that. But here's the divine reality: when you sow your resources into God's kingdom, you will reap what you sow, and you will reap more than you sow, and you will reap later than you sow. So there is a waiting period. There is a consistency that needs to happen. And I heard a great sermon on that actually tonight from Chris Basilici down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And this concept of sowing and reaping, it is a spiritual law. And so I want to encourage you to what I've always called folks who participate in the various things that I do, is not to send your money to me. If you have a heart to give money and you have a heart to see the kingdom grow, I mean, if you want to send me money, you can. I'm not going to refuse, contributions to what I do. But if you want to send money, there's a place in the magazine. It's a red button. It says "Give generously." You'll find it on various pages, but I want to speak specifically about Christ Church Jerusalem. This is the oldest Christian. This is the oldest Christian church or Protestant church in the old city Jerusalem. And last I checked, I think it was Reverend David Pelagi and Aaron Imes as a deacon who were serving there and ministering to the people in Jerusalem. Not only do they hold a Christian service, but they are actively participating in ministering to Jewish Christians, who then minister to unbelieving Jewish people who are really not at a place where they've softened their heart to receive Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. Now, the Apostle Paul, one of the things that he said, part of his ministry, was collecting up monies from the nations and allowing those monies to flow into Jerusalem, which, according to God's plan, is actually the capital of the whole planet, but to do so based on free will. So they're not going to tax you like a worldly government. They're going to say, hey, listen, we want to see people saved, and we specifically want to see God's chosen people, the Israelites. We want to see them come to a place of faith in Jesus. And one of the signs that the Old Testament promises is that the blessings and the resources and things of the nations will actually flow freely into Jerusalem, and that will be a sign that Jesus is actually Lord. And so I want to encourage you to give generously to the Mercy Fund at Christ Church, or even give basically to anything going on at Christ Church. But I like specifically the Mercy Fund, because those funds are actually used to minister to people who are on the fringes of society in Jerusalem, again, as a sign to the unbelieving Jews that Jesus Christ is actually Lord. If the American government sends money over to Israel and it backs Israel on a political stage, and helps them buy bombs and secure war advantages and things like that, that's not a bad thing. We are called to bless Israel and not to curse Israel. But at the same time, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They are spiritual, and they are mighty for pulling down strongholds. So as we bring the gospel of Jesus Christ through the power of love at work in the midst of them. That is the way to bring forth God's purposes in Israel. And so I want to encourage you with that. Of course, I want to shout out to all my friends at Freedom Church of the Palm Beaches, full gospel church with apostolic teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayers. Also located there in Lantana, Lake Worth, Florida, and just a lot of stuff, cool stuff going on there. Also in downtown Lake Worth, Florida, as many of you know, I actually participated in during the month of February and taught 4 classes on Saturday mornings during the month of February from Gentleman's Purpose and General Media Consulting specifically on the art of business and how to actually the basics of actually launching a business. There are a lot of really creative people in the Lake Worth area and business-minded people who are able to take their passions and actually turn them into income-producing vocations where they can actually support themselves and have the freedom to be small business owners. And of course, anybody that knows me knows that I believe that small business is the backbone of the U.S. economy. And so constantly want to encourage that sort of thing. And the folks at Common Ground Community Development were absolutely instrumental in allowing me the space to offer these classes. On a regular basis, they offer all sorts of music lessons, workshops, events, roundtable events. That's another place locally and domestically that if you have a heart for that sort of thing, that you may want to invest in, do your kingdom investing in that. And again, I reiterate, you reap what you sow, you reap more than you sow, and you reap later than you sow. With regard to relationships, I have to tell you, it's been kind of a very interesting thing for me. If as you've kind of been following along with my adventures, I went through a pretty crazy divorce back in the summer of 2015 when it was finalized. And since then, I really have been mostly focused on my relationship with the Lord. I'll tell you one thing, as I went through that whole situation and processed everything, it was it was the scripture that says he is a helper to him who has no helper is so incredibly real. I mean, I have never in my life experienced God the way that I experienced God when I had no one but God. And so it was an amazing, amazing season of my life. So I really haven't gotten into a whole lot of dating or seeking another relationship with a female or anything like that. I think pretty much since since the divorce, I think I've really only even thought about that type of relationship with like maybe 2 people. And so it's been an interesting thing. So what I did discover is that of course being heavily involved in social media as part of general media consulting and the kind of business that I'm in, and actively participating in that in quite a few years now, is this idea of when recently I decided to take my Facebook kind of up a notch. And in doing so, trying to kind of expand the number of people who I was kind of exposing my business and various activities to. And so I was able to take my number of Facebook friends from around 300, I guess, to about 2,600. And so in doing that, unfortunately, I ran into some situations that I really was ignorant to, and I'm actually quite happy to have been ignorant to it. There's just a lot of scandalous things going on there. I actually had a brother in Christ contact me when he saw me kind of receiving pretty much everybody that came to me and saying, hey, listen, there are some people out there that are doing some scandalous things. There are these romance scams where they pretend to like have a conversation with you and want to find out things about you, and really they're filling out a database in order to basically sell to marketers, which is like super, super unethical. And I was just like, it's just ridiculous. And so not only that, but like the whole, as somebody who was in finance for many years in a highly regulated industry, trading options and trading stocks and bonds, mutual funds and things. And now with all this cryptocurrency and the Forex and all this this stuff. I'm getting kind of hit up by all these people that are selling this financial stuff as the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they're making money. That's fantastic. Unfortunately, I've seen way, way too many times when you start investing and pumping and dumping assets and kind of putting your money into things that have no real value. They have no substance to them. It can be very exciting while it's happening, but then when they let the air out of it, it happens really quick, and a lot of people get screwed. And so I've been getting hit up by a lot of that on Facebook as well. And in the midst of that, I've met some really cool people, though. So I don't want to say that social media is all bad. It is definitely takes some vetting and some wisdom. People start hitting you up for gift cards and things like that in the middle of a conversation. You know what? There's a place to handle those sorts of things. I usually will direct them to their local church. If it is a widow who has real need and is not able to provide for herself, or if it's a child or something. Not that you have a lot of children on Facebook trying to hit people up for money, although you do have some. I've got a couple in Africa who they seem to be part of kind of a ring of people who do that sort of thing. Um, the whole thing is to be wise and not to be stupid with what's going on. And so, of course, these folks will always abuse the words of Jesus, which tell you to give to anyone who asks and lend to anyone who wants to borrow from you, not expecting anything in return. These are wonderful, wonderful things, but there are some very scandalous people who really do not understand what the wrath of God looks like and how that He levies those things against those people uh, who would abuse the generosity of Christ's bride, the church. And so it's a very, very interesting dynamic as I've kind of experienced this over the last few months. But I want to get into modern dating because almost everybody that I've ever dated or went on an actual date with has been somebody that I've met through a mutual friend. It has been somebody maybe who I met while I was hanging out at a pub or something. And so this whole idea of modern dating is very strange to me. I just, when I look at the scriptures, I see that, God prepared a woman for Adam. That's God's plan, and then brought that woman to him, presented him to her so that he would see her as a gift. We say that all good gifts come down from the Father of lights, with whom there's no shifting of shadow. And so if God brings me a woman, I'm trusting that He has prepared that woman to be a blessing in my life. Because if we ask Him for a fish, He's not going to give us a serpent. And if we ask Him for a loaf of bread, He's not going to give us a stone, right? And so when you really take hold of some of the modern dating technology, you kind of are moving away from that trust in God, and you're actually relying more on probability and statistics and scientific method in order to locate someone who has um, traits that are similar to or compatible with what you do, and allowing a computer system to basically weed out those things that are going to be less compatible and increase your probability of overall long-term success. Well, that sounds great. I think there's value in science and everything like that. And again, I know people who have really, really benefited from this dating technology and this matchmaking technology. I had a boss of mine one time, and I just remember someone coming in the door and dropping divorce papers on his desk out of nowhere. And this was a God-fearing man, and his wife just, I guess she just didn't want to be part of that anymore. Wanted to run around, do her partying thing, while he wanted to be basically a faithful guy. Go figure, right? And so he eventually participated in this thing called eHarmony, and found a beautiful woman. She had kids. He had kids. She was a Christian woman, and they have begun to build a pretty amazing life together. And so that happened through this modern technology. So I decided to kind of kick the tires of this Facebook dating app that's part of the overall Facebook. Like, if I'm going to meet somebody, I don't want it to be from like the big pool of Facebook interactions and Facebook friends. which I think that's a lot of people are that way. And that's why they actually created this separate portion of the app that actually has specific things for matching people who are likely to get along well. And so I checked that out. I filled out the profile. Took me a few minutes to kind of check that out and everything, and talked to a couple different people, and then finally met a beautiful, beautiful woman from Alabama. And of course, that song "Sweet Home Alabama" has been playing in playing in my mind as we have been getting to know one another and kind of having conversations. But a beautiful woman, absolutely. She's bright. She's intelligent. She's a leader in her industry, and we've just been having some good conversations. And we were able to keep it clean, something different than what I was actually experiencing with the general population of Facebook interactions from women asking me for dick pics and all this sort of stuff that was going on. I'm like, you know what? So this was just a lot more real, a lot more the ability to kind of like, I guess, to kind of screen that sort of stuff out. I guess there's a lot of women on these dating apps who they'll straight up tell you, I'm not looking for a hookup. That's not what I do. I'm not that kind of girl or this and that. And there are apps that specifically deal with that. But apparently it's something that, that I also had to make very clear on my profile in order to say, hey, this is not what I'm looking for, but this is. And that way you're able to connect with the people who are actually, you're kind of walking in the same direction. And I think that's kind of cool. And the reason why I think that's kind of cool is because someone once told me that, Justin, with regard to a new relationship, a new love interest in your life, just keep focused on running after Jesus and running after what he's calling you to. And if you look over to your right or to your left and you see that there's a woman who's running in the same direction as you, and you see she's there pretty consistently, then that may or may not be the woman for you, but it's much more likely. And you're going to be better off if you're focused more on what God's calling you to. And then if he brings that woman alongside to you, that's a good thing. And of course, that gets back to my concept of things, and that God will bring a man, the woman that he has prepared for him, as he did with Adam and with Eve. And so just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I just want to encourage you if you are a single man and you are out there and you are kind of thinking, what's it going to be like for me to actually engage in a relationship and start to maybe build a family and whatnot, I would again encourage you to be wise and be warned concerning technology and how that plays a part in that process. But that there are some useful tools going on that should be or could be used, and if you do choose to do so, like with anything, do so discerningly. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is kind of going back to getting into style. Now, I am, as I said, here in Statesville, North Carolina. Johnny Cross is an old Navy man, and so when I come to his house, he bought this house back in I don't know, 1950 something. I think he paid like 12,500 bucks for it. Beautiful, beautiful home. It's an older home, but he's lived here for a long, long time. And Johnny's a faithful man, and I'm super glad for the hospitality that he's shown me as I'm kind of passing through. And but I wanted to kind of talk about this idea of the study or the den. I've know people who have spent thousands, some hundreds of thousands of dollars on developing a quote unquote man cave. Basically with big screen TVs or even kind of theater seating and all these sorts of things, and they kind of built this place in their home as an escape from all the craziness of life and just to kind of unplug from everything and just kind of lose themselves in the imagination and the fantasy of movies, or their favorite sports teams and things like that. And we as humans have this need to unplug and withdraw and get by ourselves sometimes. And so I totally get that. And so, but what I wanted to talk with you a little bit about, and what I talk about in this month's magazine, is the idea of, maybe using that and investing a little bit more fruitfully in that kind of time that we enjoy unplugging, and that is moving from the man cave back to the idea of a study or a den. This is gentleman's purpose. And so part of the purpose or the focus of this magazine is helping men to identify what God's purpose for them is and to walk in that while keeping their balance in all things. And one of the blessings of a study or of a den or a home library or office for a gentleman is that the idea of building a library for yourself, having a place where you can sit back and think through the current events of the day and have conversations with friends and family and smoke a pipe and have an old fashioned and have conversations. This is something that it gets back to what I think is a much more real man who is equipped to move through the world in a beneficial and a positive way. I mean, don't get me wrong, knowing sports stats and things like that is fun. It's important. It definitely helps you connect with other men and those sorts of things. But I think you get a much broader spectrum from investing in a library, spending time reading, spending time in real conversation with other people. And that's of course one of the benefits of going to the pub. When you go to the pub, you have a couple beers, but you also connect with your friends and you have those conversations. Many of you guys know that I'm a big fan of the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, who used to meet at a pub in Oxford called the Eagle and the Child, and they would discuss all the events of the day and the writing that they were doing with regard to essays and books and things like that, and bounce ideas off of each other. It just seems that we have lost that level of connection between men, and that is a sad, sad thing. And we have lost the art of conversation. And so in this month's edition of Gentleman's Purpose, that's one of the things I talk about is, you know, if you are a homeowner and you have the ability to construct for yourself or orchestrate for yourself a small den, study, something like that, or maybe some will be more extravagant. Some of you guys have a lot more money than others, but if you own a home and you were able to build yourself a study and actually utilize that for things like reading and writing and meeting with other gentlemen and having a cocktail together and just kind of talking over current events, reading the Wall Street Journal or reading your local newspaper and kind of discussing those things. And of course, doing so critically and doing so with wisdom and kind of delving into those subjects and learning to think more than just kind of being force fed what people give you. I think that's something that's going to be a positive thing for us gentlemen, in that we don't want to be the type of people who think what people tell us to think. We want to be the type of men who know how to think for ourselves and to evaluate things and to make wise choices and movements forward in order to be a blessing to our friends, our neighbors, and our communities. So the next thing I wanted to talk with you guys about tonight, and again, something that we cover in the magazine, is business. Now, as many of you know, I was in the finance industry for many, many years, and I used to have this client of mine. His name was David. His wife was Rita. They were just the sweetest, sweetest people. And they were Jewish, and I was working in South Florida, and they actually were clients of a previous manager. And basically, once I took over as manager, they kind of latched on to me and spent a lot of time working with me, and you know, they're just good people. And unfortunately, Dave passed away. And at his funeral, it was interesting. When I went to his funeral, I went to the temple, and it's the first time I'd ever been to a Jewish funeral before. And I walk in, and they hand me one of the yarmulke, which is like the little round hat that goes back here. And I asked the rabbi, I'm like, Rabbi, I'm not Jewish. Should I put this thing on my head or what? And he's like, "Well, out of respect, you should." I said, "Okay." And so I didn't really understand what it was for, what it meant, or what anything about it. But But I put it on my head because he told me to. He said it was a respectful thing, so I did. But anyway, so the thing about David is David was a soldier. He was a ball turret gunner in World War II. And if you're not familiar with what a ball turret is, it is basically a ball that's maybe, I don't know, maybe like it's got maybe a radius of maybe like 3, 4 feet, maybe very, very small. And basically, these David would tuck down into this little ball, and this ball would be connected to the underbelly of a warplane. And David would sit in this little ball, and it could swivel around while the airplane was flying. So he's in the belly of, on the very underside belly of the plane, and this thing that swivels around, like shooting Nazis and stuff. I mean, that was his job, right? Just he's sitting in this ball, swiveling around, shooting Nazis. The problem is if this plane crash landed and it had to land without its landing gear on the belly of this plane, David was done for. Any ball turret gunner would be completely done for. Um, but David wasn't. He fought in World War II. He fulfilled his mission. He came home and was very successful in business and in investing and whatnot. And so when I was traveling and found myself in Warner Robins, Georgia, Warner Robins, Georgia is one of two cities in the United States of America that is actually completely built initially around the planting of an Air Force community. And so when I was there, I went down to the visitor center when I first arrived and talked to a gal by the name of Kenny and asked her, hey, if you had 48 hours to do anything you wanted, 24, 48 hours to do it, to do the three most exciting things in Warner Robins, what would you do? And so one of the things she directed me to was the Aeronautical Museum, the Museum of Aeronautics for the Air Force that's located there. And so I went over there and I checked it out, and there was this guy Michael who was actually restoring a ball turret and installing it in the underbelly of a plane. And it's the first time I've ever seen an actual ball turret. I mean, David told me these stories, and I knew how, the height of David, but this was kind of mind blowing. And so I went over there and I kind of checked it out. And Michael, who was doing the restoration of the plane, he invited me to kind of go into uh, into the what do you call it, like the behind the ropes type area, and kind of check things out and everything, and showed me the underbelly of the plane. And it was just really, really cool. And so as I spent time with my stepdad, who's also an Air Force veteran, I met some people there. I met actually a U.S. Air Force colonel who was retired. I mean, he had a beautiful stretch of land and drives a real nice Corvette. I think it was like a C6 or something. I forget what it was. A freaking amazing car. And so me and my stepdad did some work on his RV while I was in town, and I was just got to talking with him. And he's struggling with prostate cancer, and here's this man who served as a pilot, flying a warplane in Vietnam, and having struggles with how he is going to be able to take care of this health situation he's going with, because he's experiencing problems with the VA hospital. And the VA hospital is very good with their care and everything, but there are also a lot of times some hurdles and things that you have to go through. And so as he was kind of sharing with me some of his struggles, and I was thinking about this man and kind of all that he's been through in as an officer, or as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. And I thought about David, and I thought about my stepdad, and what it means to actually serve our country and to be willing to lay our lives down for something greater than ourselves. And that's a powerful thing. And of course, if you go over to General Media Consulting's website, to our blog, there's a recommended reading section. And I, of course, always recommend Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation, to kind of think through what does it look like for us to actually be the types of people who have that level of character, and types of people who are valiant. Those people that are who are able to step up to the plate and do those things that need to be done in order to really care for our communities and our nation. And so it's just it was a great experience, and all this relates to business because we we engage in conversation and meetings with people in business sometimes. And sometimes I think that we're so focused on closing the deal, we're so focused on getting the money that we miss these amazing business relationships with people who can add so much value to our lives as we communicate with them and we do life with them. Yes, there's a business relationship where there's an exchange of products and services and money and those sorts of things, because we're not in business to make friends, we're in business to make money. Or is that true? I mean, why are we in business? Are we in business to actually make the world better? Because that would be a better way to look at it, I think. And I think I've looked at and talked with different people concerning that. I've read some things by guys like Seth Godin, who's just an absolutely superior personality in marketing, who really tries to get marketers to focus on how, and business people, how are you making the world better? And if you are making the world better, tell the people how you are making the world better. And if you can't do that, then you need to go back to the drawing board. Because if what you do isn't doing that, then you're not adding value. And that's a problem. And so it was pretty cool. And so as I explored the aviation thing, I thought about, the whole business of war and the business of aeronautics and all these sorts of things, and how much money can be made in developing and building these things in order to protect ourselves and to defend our borders, and to make sure that our citizens remain safe and can live lives that are quiet and honoring to God, and what that actually looks like. Because in the scriptures it tells us that the the governing authorities that wield the sword, they don't do so for no reason. And if we do good, then they'll be a blessing to us. But if we do evil, then we need to be in fear. And so it's an interesting thing. The second thing, or one of the other places that Kenny talked to me about in Warner Robins, Georgia, was I asked her for three things that she would do if she had 48 hours in Warner Robins, Georgia. One of them was the Museum of Aeronautics, and the second was, or the Museum of Aviation. The second was was this Mexican restaurant by the name of El Bronco. And I'm like, really? Of all the stuff that you can do in your town, you're telling me a Mexican restaurant? She's like, oh yeah, it's an amazing Mexican restaurant. And I was there last night, she said. I said, okay, well, tell me about it. And so she told me about this place called El Bronco. And there is a dining section in Gentleman's Purpose magazine where we explore different restaurants and recipes and all sorts of good things. And so I went in there, and I tell you, I'm not much of a tequila guy. And they have a small, medium, and a large margarita. I went for the medium one. Whew! I was like, it threw me for a loop. I got home and I had to lay down. I was like, good Lord, I don't know what they put in that thing, but it kicked my butt. And but they had some amazing food. I ate there actually several times while I was in town. The chicken and beef flautas were amazing. The lunch fajitas are extremely reasonably priced, and everything is fresh and delicious. And so I definitely would encourage you that if you're ever in Georgia, in Warner Robins, and you want to stop in for a great Mexican meal, El Bronco Mexican restaurant is fantastic. It's on Watson Boulevard, and I definitely want to check that out and enjoy that. Now, in kind of discussing some of the topics that we've talked about tonight and in the magazine, when I think about what do you call it? When I think about believing into the now, and actually what that looks like and how that actually is fleshed out in the Christian faith, one of the best authors that I have found in my discipleship, who I respect highly, he's, obviously, anytime you are on the cutting edge of researching Christian archaeology and Christian history, and actually translating that into theology and helping people to be discipled. You're going to have your detractors, but this guy is somebody who I think is consistently strong in his ability to articulate what the gospel is, uh, what the hope it creates for us is, and getting into the mind of the early apostles, particularly the apostle Paul, in order to help us to develop and to take hold of what it means to be a disciple, and then to really delve into our own character development and to our own discipleship. And so as I encourage you, gentlemen, to have your own library, to start collecting books that are going to be not only for you but for your children and your children's children, and so on and so forth. I'd much rather give my kids an extensive library than a fancy watch as an heirloom. And so I included in this month's uh, magazine what I consider four essential books from Tom Wright that, if you read them in order, will give you essentially a well-rounded view of what Christianity is calling you to as a gentleman, and also what it's not calling you to. And I think that it's there's just such amazing content. Now, these particular four books are on Tom Wright's lower end of writing, and what do I mean by that? Tom is extremely intelligent. He can speak at the highest level of theological scholarship, and yet he has a pastor's heart. And so he writes books that really cover the entire spectrum, from whether you were, a 15-year-old kid who's just learning about Jesus, to you are you've graduated with a Master of Divinity from Dallas Theological Seminary. He can like give you stuff to chew on and challenge your thinking, and get you into some really in-depth conversations. These books add value to basically the everyday guy like me. And so this is the first book is called How God Became King. And essentially what Jesus, or what Tom does here, is he looks at the gospels and he explores Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in a way that looks at the central message of these royal proclamations that the Davidic king, that Israel was hoping and expecting, has actually landed on the scene, and what that means for Israel, what that means for the world. So this idea of the Gospels being the story of how the living God, the incarnate God, actually became present and actually reestablished his position as Lord or King over creation, as Israel's Messiah, is a fantastic starting point in the faith journey of anybody who's interested in exploring Christianity. The second book is called Surprised by Hope. And has been an extremely controversial book, because in Western Christianity, we have significantly slipped into some forms of Gnosticism that have been less than helpful. As a matter of fact, I would agree with Tom in the fact that the level of Gnosticism in Western Christianity is a significant reason for the lack of effectiveness of the church in accomplishing God's calling on our lives within America and within the world. And so, in Surprised by Hope, Tom takes us on a journey of recapturing what the central hope of the gospel is, and getting back to a biblical idea of new creation, a biblical idea of the hope being resurrection, of the biblical idea of the God who said in the beginning, after he created, everything, it is very good. And his word being absolutely true, and him reclaiming and fulfilling that word with this promise of new creation or the restoration of all things is so incredibly vital to us getting back to a biblical Christianity. A lot of times, we in Western Christianity like to, holler, semper reformanda, always be reforming, until we actually get called to reform our thinking. And then it becomes, we want those Catholics to reform. We want them to rethink the way they do things. But when we get called to reform kind of our thoughts and our approach to things, we're just as slow to do so, apparently, in certain instances, as some of our Catholic brothers and sisters. And so, with God's help, we will all come to a place of humility and embrace a biblical Christianity. And so, Surprised by Hope is just a fantastic, fantastic book for helping us to wrestle with those things. The third book, once you kind of establish the concept of Jesus being Lord, and you think through what the hope that we have since he is Lord is in the future he's leading us into, what does it look like to have our worldview and have the way that we do life radically transformed, and then to be utilized as a vessel for God to bring his glad, wise order into creation, and also as a vessel to gather up creation's praises and to offer them to God as part of our priestly vocation. And one of the best ways to do that is to get into the life, into the mind, into the heart of the Apostle Paul. And so N.T. Wright, being a specializing in being a historian that specializes in Second Temple Judaism, this particular book gives you almost like a biography of the person, Saul of Tarsus, who became Paul the Apostle. And in doing so, we can kind of grapple with some of the things that we need to grapple with in order to understand what it means to have our minds renewed, and to have that renewal of our minds inform our behaviors and our own vocations and our own ministry within this world. And so, beautiful, beautiful writing in that. And then from there, really drilling down into our personal lives and getting really, really um, getting real with ourselves is the book After You Believe Why Christian Character Matters. This is a book that explores the three primary Christian virtues, um, and how they differ from the virtues that are set forth by other worldviews that are rooted in philosophy, from guys like Plato and Socrates, and those sorts of things. And so, the three primary Christian virtues are set forth as faith, hope, and love, love being the greatest of the three. And so, what does it mean for us to develop our character in the areas of faith, hope, and love? And this book, I think, does a fantastic job of giving us some things to wrestle with on a very personal level of our own discipleship. And I think, again, after looking at what the gospel is, where Jesus is leading us to, and how he's doing that, and what that looks like in the life of a mentor like Paul, and then taking hold of and grappling with in our own lives what it means to have our character shaped by the ministry of the Word and of the Spirit. And so those are four books I would highly recommend. I call those Essential Tom Wright. In your library would be fantastic. With regard to music, of course, you guys know that I am, as we get into the music section of Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine, having been spending quite a lot of time in South Florida, had an opportunity to experience different bands and things in the Lake Worth area, as well as, of course, working for some of my clients who have venues where they offer live music. It's been really great to be able to kind of experience different genres. And of course, this isn't Christian music, and Gentleman's Purpose is, even though I am a Christian, and so is the company that I run, these particular artists are not necessarily Christians, and it's not necessarily Christian music, but they are popular up and coming musicians in the South Florida music scene. And so I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to them, let you guys know they're out there and what they're doing. These are folks who are passionate about the music that they're making. They have a message to bring. These are the types of people that I include in the music section of the magazine. And so you can click on the red "Hear" button to kind of hear music from from Zali. That's XALI, or Resonate, which is Resonate is more of a kind of like a cover band. They participate in a lot of local venues to be able to entertain the folks and everything like that, which is fantastic. And then the one that I really, really enjoyed was Black Violin. And if you click on that button and kind of get into that, I personally am the type of, I love different types of instruments. And to me, like when I listen to Guns N' Roses, like November Rain, and they bring in the violins and the orchestra music and everything, I think that's amazing. My friend Tracy Renee, she actually will make different instruments from various things, just make different instruments to get different sounds in her music. And I love that. I love the creativity of it. I love the variety of the different instruments and how they come together and bring this just amazing sound. And so I enjoy that sort of thing. I enjoy all sorts of different types of music. And so as you check out the various musicians that you can find in General Media Consulting. It is an e-magazine, so there's links all through the magazine, or you can actually click the link and it'll take you to a page, whether it's a YouTube page or a website, and check these different things out. And so yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to talk with you about tonight is, of course, gear. As we get into the gear section, I spent some time with my stepdad, as I said, in Warner Robins, Georgia. And growing up, he taught us how to use so many tools, me and my brother. And when I went to work for my brother for a little while, and he said, "Hey, make sure that every time you get paid, go over there to go over there to the hardware store and buy yourself a tool, and sooner, pretty soon you'll have plenty of tools, and there's always something that needs fixing. So if there, you'll never be in a situation where you can't have some way to earn some money." And so, and he got that from working with my stepdad, and my stepdad taught us how to work on cars, how to detail cars, how to build stuff and fix things. And so I'm really thankful for those relationships. So I headed over to one of my new favorite hardware stores, and kind of check them out. I don't know if you guys have heard of Harbor Freight, but the tools they have there, they're high quality. The prices are extremely reasonable. They're produced by some tool manufacturers out of like Pennsylvania and stuff like that, and just a great store, and really helpful people. And so there's some things in there just to encourage you to, as a man, to learn how to use different tools, to start building yourself a collection of tools so that you can be available to help that maiden in distress who needs something fixed. I'm here. I told you it's at Johnny Cross's house, and just the other day I was cooking some supper and realized that his sink was gushing water underneath the kitchen counter, and so we were able to take a few minutes and run to the hardware store, get the parts we needed, and get it fixed real quick. And now he won't have to mess with that for probably the rest of his life. And part of being a gentleman is being able to take care of those things. And so just want to, and again, ladies can do that sort of thing too. I'm not saying they can. I'm just saying that as a gentleman, we have a responsibility to do something like that. And so it's, what do they say? A a well, what is that saying? Something like a woman doesn't need a man to do those things for her, but a real man won't let her do those sorts of things, something like that. And so, unless she wants to, of course. And so, just want to encourage you guys, some stuff produced by Pittsburgh, um, hammers, basic tools, drills, just some essentials that you should get, and kind of you can work your way up from there. One of the good things about being in Warner Robins, Georgia, was getting to travel. I haven't got to travel in longer than I would like to say, and so to be able to jump in my vehicle, I picked up that 2010 Mercedes E350. down in Boynton Beach, Florida. It was owned by it was a one owner car owned by an elderly couple, and they basically only drove it like 7,200 miles a year. Never been wrecked. It's like mint condition, and so to be able to stretch its legs has been fantastic. I went over to Arrowhead Park in Georgia. It's in Macon, Georgia, and actually, when I first arrived at my stepdad's house, was able to find a I was able to find on the internet a place that had mountain bike trails, Arrowhead Park, and so I went over there. Actually, went twice. The first time I went, I kind of rode what was the red trail, and I was thinking that was the more difficult of the trails, but it was really a short little loop, and um, and I rode the trail, loaded my bike back up, and went to look for another trail to ride. And in the process of driving through the park, I heard like a gunshot. I was like, "What was that?" And I was thinking, well, Mercedes has like these run flat tires, so maybe my tire blew out. I don't feel it, but let me stop the car and look. So I stopped the car, I walk around, look at the tires, everything's fine with the car, and the back tire on my mountain bike blew out, and I had just put a new tube in it that morning. And so I was like, well, wow, okay. So I'm thankful that it didn't blow out while I was speeding down one of those mountain trails. But and so I went back home, and about a week later, I went ahead and I took the rim off, and I sanded down anything that seemed rough to me on the inside of the aluminum um, wheel, and I put a new tube in it. I bought a new tire and put on there. And so that seemed to fix the problem, because I came back and I actually chose to go on their most advanced trail, which is like a black diamond or black trail. Black diamond, which is the more technical and more difficult trail. And it was way more challenging than the first one that I went on. So I was out there for quite a while. Saw some beautiful mountain streams, just some great foliage. It was just a beautiful day, and totally enjoyed that. So if you're ever traveling through Georgia and you're into mountain biking, camping, if you like boating and fishing, it's called Arrowhead Park. It's in Macon, Georgia. It's like $3 to get in for the day. It's super reasonable. The people were very nice, and everything like that. And so there's an article in Gentleman's Purpose that kind of covers that a little bit more in depth, as well as my visit to a couple other places. Like, you guys ever heard of Bucky's? Never heard of it before. It's like the world's largest gas station, filling station, and convenience store. The place is amazing, and they've got some beef jerky and some barbecue that is off the chain. And so yeah, if you're ever in Warden Robins, Georgia, Bucky's, check out the Museum of Aviation, and definitely head on over to Macon, Georgia, do some mountain biking, and don't forget El Bronco though. Mexican food for days, so good. All right, so that's basically the show for tonight. I'm wish I could have had some of you guys chime in and have some conversation. Of course, if you ever have any questions about anything that we talk about here on Gentleman's Purpose Live or on Gentleman's Purpose e-magazine, feel free to email me at justin@generalmediaconsulting.com, or you can call me at 1-800-484-9825, especially if you are an entrepreneur or business owner who would like some assistance with your business. That is what we specialize in. And again, there's some free resources for you at generalmediaconsulting.com. Encourage you to go over and check that out. And other than that, have a fantastic weekend, and we will talk to you again next month.